Yay!
Yay, here we are. Okay. I was like, what? My
Woohoo!
camera was
Success.
on. My camera was on, and my camera was off. And I was like, what is happening? What's going on here? So, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm doing really well. I'm happy that it's Friday. And, each week is different, as we all know. Some weeks are like, woo, from start to finish. Other weeks are like, when is it going to be Friday? Why is this week taking so long? So my week started off really great, and because I got to spend the weekend before babysitting my 7-month-old nephew, and so that was fun to just
Oh,
have that baby energy around, and the whole vibe. And then it was like back to work, and so it was kind of a challenge.
you're like you're like, oh, I gotta be serious again.
Yes,
Back
exactly.
into the adult and not the
Yeah, I
kid.
have to be a whole adult now. And it's so funny having an infant around. It's so depending on, like, how deep you want to go with it. But I feel like having an infant around really does give us an opportunity to, like, check ourselves on, like, how seriously we're taking life, because they're so explorative, they're so imaginative, and they're also just so free. Like, he's learning how to crawl and, like, pull himself up, and if he falls over, if we don't, like, react like, "Ooh," he's like, "Okay," and then just gets back up again. I'm like, I need to do that more. So, things you can
He's like
learn from a 7-month-old.
he's like, I'm good. Why are you guys freaking out?
Exactly. He's like, now I feel like maybe I should freak out because you're freaking out, but otherwise I would be fine. So, anywho, welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy to have you here today, and I just want to say thank you again for saying yes to being a part of this project. This conversation is going to feel very casual, very informative, and also very chill. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and there's a handful of them that I really enjoy because the person who's hosting or interviewing really allows their guests to kind of take up a lot of space, and that's my encouragement for you as well. So we'll move through some questions that might sound familiar, and then I might have some new questions for you too. And so I just encourage you to take up as much or as little space as you'd like. This is a free speech podcast, so you know, say what you got to say, you know, and leave it at that. And that's okay. So I'm going to give you the mic here and just take a moment to introduce yourself to the listeners by telling us your name, where you're from, and what you stand for.
Thank you for having me and reaching out. I was really surprised that I was like, wait, oh my gosh, you responded. So hello, listeners. My name is Nikki Hill. I'm based out of California. Um, I've been thinking about that question. What is it that I stand for? And I always come back to connection and how, be it connection with people, the environment, experiences, even memories, just there's a connection there. And it's like sometimes it's can be, pretty superficial, but sometimes it can be super, super just in depth, and it just hits you in like such a way that it leaves an impact. You're like, oh wow, that was okay, that was important. That connection was needed. That brought in whatever needed to bring in, good, bad, or whatever. So just being aware of, I think for myself, the different connections that I have, and through the experiences and the lessons that they bring and stuff. So
Hmm, that's a good point. I mean, I think I would say, especially now, at not even just because of what we experienced globally last year or still experiencing this year, where the concept of connection seems somewhat fleeting because we got used to connecting in one specific way, in person gatherings, outings, etc., and we had to learn how to connect in a different way with virtual connections and things like that. I think that as human beings, we thrive off of connection. We thrive off of community. And sometimes those connections can lead to romantic relationships, business opportunities, friendships, chosen family, etc. I find that in the last year or so that I really got in touch with the connection to self in a way that,
Hmm.
hadn't
Yeah.
really done before. So how about
Yeah.
you? How's it been for the last year or so as far as what your connection to yourself has been looking like?
I will say 2020 was, and even into now, was definitely the year of growth, whether we wanted to have it or not. It happened. Um, but I was thinking the connection to self, like I've been aware of this for a while now. I can't put a length of time on it, but that the most important relationship that we have is with ourselves. We are with each other from conception to the day that we transition into, um, not being here in the physical form. And I will say for myself, it was 2020 was good in a different way for me, where it allowed me to slow down and to step back from the going to work and the being in that constant like go go go, and being like, oh, you need to step back and like rest and really just kind of just be a little bit more. And it's not that I didn't have those pockets of time, like 2019 and prior and stuff, but 2020 was definitely that whole reconnecting of self in such a way where it was just like not necessarily I'd say redefining myself, as more being comfortable to step into myself, if that makes sense.
That makes
you
total
know
that
so
makes
in that sense, that sense of, I've always known what my purpose was or happens to be, but being comfortable and confident enough to step into that role and to show up in that role, um, is definitely what I came out of 2020 with.
mm.
Whereas before it was like, I know I can do this thing. I know I can do this thing, but not fully comfortable in that skin of that role and what that means and stuff. Whereas now I'm like, you know what? I'm comfortable and confident in stepping into this role and what this means for me and what it means for others, in sense of like just the collective community and stuff like that, and how I connect and how I show up, and really looking at, am I coming from a place that is really truly genuine, or is this, or am I engaging in this thing because it's the trend to do, you know uh, because there's a lot of that. you know where it's just like, oh, this is a trend, we should jump on this bandwagon. It's like, but that's, if you're not really about the thing, whatever it happens to be, don't do it
Mm-hmm.
just because you want the post or you want the follows, or it's, I think that ties into the instant gratification that our culture is very much has become more a part of, I'll say, in the last decade or so, give or take.
Yeah.
um and it's like, well, if you're gonna do it, be genuine about it, but also know you don't always have to post about it.
Mm. That's
Like,
a very interesting point because there was a phrase that, was happening that I started hearing more frequently in the last, 3 to 5 years is, if you didn't post about it, it didn't happen. If you didn't
mhm,
post
I've
about it,
heard
it
that.
didn't exist. Or, if you didn't post about it, it's like you were never there.
Or
And
like the whole relationship status, it's like, if your relationship status isn't posted, then you're not in a relationship.
yeah, it's like if it's not validated by the internet, specifically by social media, if it's not validated by social media, then it didn't happen, it didn't exist, and you don't exist. Do you
Mhm.
ever feel that? Like I sometimes it's interesting because when we think about this concept of connection, when, social media first, when I was first introduced to social media, truth be told, I can take it back to the 90s when, Black Planet, existed back when I was in college. And that was like a form of social media before all these apps and other platforms were created. And then there was Downlink, like in the queer community. That was another like social media connective, platform. And then over time we had MySpace, then Facebook hit the scene, and the game just changed at that point.
Mhm.
I think that because we desire community and because we desire connection, sometimes people find themselves putting more of themselves out there than they normally would for the
Mhm.
sake of garnering that connection or getting that validation. Like I was talking to my partner the other day and I said, "Do you remember a time when people didn't take pictures of their food?" Like I don't ever remember in like high school or college being like, "Oh my God, click." And then like going to the photo lab, getting a picture of food developed and like giving it to all my friends. Like, here, this is what I ate yesterday. It's like sometimes my brain does like imaginative things like, what if we didn't have the technology we had today? Would we still connect or engage in the same way? Posting or sharing, like if I had to physically print out these pictures and mail them to people, would I mail it to 1,000 people to tell them that I had really great sourdough last night?
I will say, when it comes to that, like, and how I engage with the social media, um, I really think about what is my intent behind what it is that I'm doing. So, like, I have, like, I'm not always taking pictures of things and stuff like that, but sometimes I will see something like a sunset or a cloud formation, or like yesterday I was driving at the drive-through to Panera and there was, out of nowhere, here comes this lizard. I was like, where did you come from? And I'm like, I will take that as a message. I'm like, but I'm gonna get this picture of you too. And I was like, wait, don't move. And it moved into the light and it had these like really pretty like blues in the reflective of its like scales and stuff like that. And I'm like, ooh, this is really cool, you know? And it's like I haven't posted it, but it's one of those things of just like, I mean, like, I just want to share it with you just because I'm like, I just thought this was random and interesting and just cool, just this experience and stuff. And for individuals that are maybe a little bit more on the spiritual side of things, like they can like take that and like, you know, the message that they might glean for it or not, or it's just more of just like, you know, it's like, here's this moment that I happened to see. I captured it. I want to share with all of you because I think it's that amazing, but it's not the, hey, look at me, I'm pumping gas kind of thing. I'm just going, essentially, to me, I've always seen like social media is kind of like that weird way that we're allowed to stalk each other sort of legally, you know, in a weird sense. Because hey, I'm here, hey, I'm there, but also at the same time, it does allow us to connect with each other on a much different way than we did before social media. Um, and it allows us to connect with people around like the entire world, you know, through 2020, um, when everything happened, like my work closed down and stuff like that. So there were times where we were open, there were times where we were closed. And but even still, I was on a lot of music live streams. So I connected with, you know, some people. So now I know a couple people in Singapore. I know someone else in Australia and somebody else in South Korea and stuff like that. But I've also been, you know, able to find out about all these other music DJs that, unless you knew about the event that they probably DJ'd at, I would have never known about them, you know. So social media, I think it's a double-edged sword. It can be really, really useful and really, really great to bring us together despite the miles of distance and things like that, to be able to go like, hey, I made this thing, like I saw this recipe and I made it and I'm really proud of it and I want to share it. And then but then like that's like I'm genuinely like, I'm really proud of this, I want to share this with all of you. Or it's like, hey, you guys couldn't be here at this concert, but I did get a little bit of clip, so this is what you get, but I'm not recording the entire thing because I want to be in the moment of the concert that I'm at. but since you guys can't be here with me and I know you guys like this band too, here you go. I rocked out, had a good time, but then there's also the, wanting this external validation with all these clicks and stuff like that, where I've heard on another podcast, I think, where it was mentioned, your popularity is based on how many followers you have.
Mm.
And it's just like, but that is so fleeting. And
Mhm.
it's so just kind of like, I mean, I think it comes down to like how much weight are you putting into that, I think, and versus, again, that connection to self. Like, it'll all start with you. So if you are good and comfortable and confident with you, and you've got your like core group of people and maybe like the next circle around that and stuff like that, like you're good. So anything else where you're just like, okay, yeah, I've got X amount of thousands of followers or however many, and it's like, yay, like I appreciate you guys because you like the thing that I post and I share. And that's more of a, oh, that makes me feel good, like you've connected with me on some way because of my content, but at the end of the day, like if that went away, are you still you, and are you still comfortable with you, or if that went away, you lose you.
Mm. That's so real because and I think about, my generation, I'm a Gen Xer, and then my partner's what technically would be a millennial, or she said the other day a geriatric millennial, whatever the hell that is. And I'm like, okay. And then my son would be considered Gen Z. And I think that, I have the opportunity to kind of interact with people from several different, my parents would be boomers and blah, blah, blah. I
Yeah.
think how all of us were introduced to this platform, this concept, this method of connection of social media all at the same time, but it hit us at different ages. For my son, he's a native to technology. He was born into
Mm-hmm.
the internet world. My parents were like, "What's this now? Oh, I need this. I find that I need this to stay connected to my kids or stay connected to my, friends or old classmates." But this concept of who will I be without the followers? Am I still valuable, worthy? Do I still matter? Do I even exist without these, followers, without these likes, without these clicks and these shares and etc. And when you mentioned, being at a concert and, let me take a couple quick pictures or snap a video real fast versus I remember going to a show. The last time I went to a show was a while ago, of course, but like looking around and seeing everybody just like holding up their phones, recording the whole show. And I'm thinking, like, you're not getting like high quality video for one. Two, you know what I'm saying? You're on a live,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So it's like,
Yeah.
are you doing this so that you can, like, again, what my son would call like a clout chaser? Like, I'm at the Beyonce concert, I got floor seats, ooh, look at me, and let me see if my like count goes up or see if my followers increase, and then I feel good about myself. There was this
Yeah.
doc, I don't remember the name of it right now, but there's a documentary that's on Netflix. Oh god, it's called like the social experiment or social something, but it's basically talking about the physiological experiences that happen within the human body through the social media interactions that we've become so keen to, and we've adopted fully into our lives, and the dopamine, doses that we receive when we see a like or we see a follow or somebody leaves a cool comment or we notice that our, photo or our poem or our music has been reshared, and we're like, yes, I'm accepted, I matter, okay, I can get out of bed another day. How did we do it before? you know
Mm-hmm.
I graduated from high school in the 90s, and popularity at that time was based similarly as it is now in how we appear, what our hair
Mm-hmm.
looks like, what our clothes look like. When we started driving cars, what kind of car did you drive? Like the decisions that were being made about what was popular, what was acceptable, what was likable, what was normal had a lot to do with how we presented ourselves to the world. And now social media just expanded that platform from
Mm-hmm.
classmates to our schoolmates to our neighborhood maybe our city if you were like an athlete or something. But now it's like you said, Singapore, South Korea, Australia, like now everybody gets to decide if I'm worthy, if I'm popular, if I matter, you know? So it's like you said, it's very much a double-edged sword. And when I think about it, for myself, I, as a, an entrepreneur, I'm like, I got to be on social media. I got to engage with my audience. This is going to garner me clients. This is how I build connections. This is how I build relationships. But man, there's some days where I'm like, this is terrible. None of this stuff really matters. I'm deleting the whole app. But it's like a wavering, spectrum. Um, you mentioned in your pre-podcast, questionnaire that music is your therapist. Can you talk to me a little
uh,
bit
my love of music. um, Music is my therapist because music hits every possible range of emotion. There are just frequencies and vibrations that, like, there can be times where I'm feeling really frustrated and I may not know why, like I can't pinpoint the thing, but I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to this artist and I'm just going to listen to them and to go through that process with that emotion and that frequency and then be like, okay, I'm good. I'm no longer on this frequency. So now I can like hop back into something else, whether I'm listening to like maybe like rock and metal bands like In This Moment, Papa Roach, or Disturbed, and then the next minute I'm like going through my Thai drama, playlist that from songs that I've heard from there. I'm like, oh, I like you. I'm like, I'm gonna dive into you. Or, maybe I'm feeling more like R&B, like older R&B and stuff like that. So I'm like, you know what, let's do like some Casey and JoJo or something like that, or like Aaliyah or something. So it just kind of, my tastes go all over the place sometimes. And whether I understand if the lyrics, if they happen to be in a different language or not, it still speaks to me. I'm still able to connect with it, I think on a soul level, because it transcends, words. You don't necessarily need words to communicate. It can be helpful, but sometimes you can kind of make those connections via, music, and it's kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, that's what I needed. I needed that song to just, okay, now I'm good. I feel better. I've worked out whatever it is that needed to be worked out. That frequency is good, you know. And then sometimes it's like sharing songs with like friends and be like, oh my gosh, I heard this song and it like made me think of you and stuff like that. Or, so that's, music as my therapist is, I'm like, i I will say it's probably one of the most easiest forms and probably to access, um because you can do it through Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, whatever, and stuff like that. But it makes me think of, in terms of like connection and stuff like that, of before, making a playlist and giving it to someone,
about?
and now it's like, and like via like cassette and stuff like that, or like bringing it onto a disc and be like, that whole giving of something adds something very extra special and stuff like that. Whereas now it's like you can share music in so many different ways, but I don't know if it still has that same feeling of like, oh my gosh, that was like really sweet gesture,
Mhm.
um in that sharing and stuff like that.
Agreed. It does feel a little different. I was that person who had the dual tape cassette recorder and would make mixtapes for like birthday presents for my friends, or like to give to like boyfriends, girlfriends, whatever, as like gifts. And then I would burn CDs, and I was like the master of like the mixtape, the mix CD. That was like my thing because I too love music. I think that, and I never thought about it as therapeutic, and it really is, whether my mood is, a high mood, a low mood, or somewhere in between. If I know that I need to power through something or I need to be hyper focused, I'm going to put on a certain type of music. If I need to relax, I'm going to put on a certain type of music. If I find myself in a state of anger or rage, I'm going to put on a certain type of music. And it's either the soundtrack to my experience that I'm having right now, or it's the guiding light to get me to, like you mentioned, that frequency that I really desire. If I'm in a
Mhm.
frequency and I'm like, okay, I don't want to feel this way anymore, I can listen to music and I know that it's going to shift, my vibration, and I'm going to be in this other frequency. And it can be a vehicle for that. One of my favorite quotes from Fela Kuti is, music is a weapon also. And so I think music can be used for protest and for resistance, as well, especially when we think of music that has lyrics, music that's lyric less, that's just like percussions. Like we know when we hear percussions, it does something inside of you.
Mhm.
Or, when you hear strings, it does something. When you hear a guitar, when you hear beautiful vocals, it's like we can feel it. I remember
Mhm.
seeing years ago, it was like, probably it wasn't on YouTube because it was before YouTube, but it was this film of like grains of sand on, a solid platform, and the scientists or the whatever researchers played certain types of music, and the sand would move in different like symbols or
Mhm.
patterns based on the music that was being played. And I was like, whoa, it was just like mind blown at that moment. Like, okay, so I am feeling there is something happening inside of me when I hear music. It's not just like, oh, I like that jazzy tune. It's more like, oh no, there's something's happening here. So I want to know from you, what is your favorite form of creative expression? I know we both have a love for music. Was looking at your Instagram and I noticed what appears to be some writing. So can you talk a little bit about what your favorite form of creative expression is?
Um, Poem writing is my favorite form of expression. It's one of the things I do. It's but I always what I love and appreciate about it is that I can do it anywhere. The only times that I get frustrated is when I'm somewhere and I'm thinking about it, and then I go, okay, I hope I remember this thing that I just created in my head, and I can go and write it down.
Right.
Because I'm like, that is a great poem, and then I'll be like, oh man, I lost it, but that was great. Whatever I came up with, that was great. But I will write on my phone. I will write on the computer. I will still handwrite in notebook because there's just something about transcribing, just pen and paper, that sometimes things flow a lot easier than typing.
Mhm.
Um, and there are some things where I've gone back to, and or I've just taken like little bitty notes, and I'm like, okay, I'm like rereading and I'm going, hold on, add this, change that. Um, but it's one of those things that poetry has just sort of been always there in a way, and I have found inspiration in, through life experiences. I have a poem that I wrote called I Have Passive Aggressive Feelings. As I was trying to figure out what is this feeling that I was having, like, why is this bothering me? What is this? And I'm like, light bulb moment. Passive aggressive feelings. I have path. That's what that is. Write down this entire poem to, go through what it go through those emotions and stuff like that and what it was. Um, but then there are times where I've listened to songs, and I think one of the most recent ones I listened to was called Tunnel, and it's maybe a 2-minute instrumental piece by this Korean artist. And it just something about it just hooked me, and I listened to it on repeat and wrote this entire poem called Us, just describing just this experience of just connecting, in different ways with another person, in this particular setting of just like, ooh, like, it's like, okay, street lights from outside and stuff like that. And it's like, like our hands meet and they're exploring, but then like but we're also just connecting to this record that's playing in the background and stuff like that. So it's just I'm like those moments where I'm just like, wow, I wrote that.
Hey, I mean, you touched on it so like precisely when you said there's something different about putting pen to paper versus typing or even like thumbing it out, as I call it, when you're on your phone typing.
Hmm.
And I think there's just like a visceral, connection because it's coming from your body, touching, manipulating the pen on the paper, and it's a whole like experience that happens.
Hmm.
And when you're free writing and you're not editing as you go, listening
Hmm.
to music, or even if you're writing in silence and you go back and read, I've done that sometimes where I go back and read. I've never considered myself a poet. I definitely am a writer. I remember
Hmm.
writing poetry as young as, 10 years old. And at the time it was more like I was writing raps, you know what I mean? I wasn't like writing them to perform them or to say them like at school or something. So everything was
Yeah.
rhythmic and rhymey, but then as I got older, there's sometimes, when I would journal, I'm not writing like a story or writing a recap of a day or an experience. It was coming out very poetically and very lyrically. And I'd go back and read it and say, oh, this is good. Like, I should like post this on Instagram, or I should like put it in a book, or I should read it out loud. And then my partner is a poet. She's a slam poet. So like her genre is more competitive and, her voice is coming from a very robust, place. And so, and our pieces are performance pieces as well. And
Hmm.
so what I love about the realm of poetry as creative expression is that it's so flexible and it's so vast. And when you as the writer goes back and reviews what you've written and it still impacts you, that's how you know it's like that good shit. So I noticed the way that we connected, for those who don't know, was through Instagram. And there was a post, that went up a couple of weeks ago about one of the episodes of my podcast that you had listened to about healing relationships with a good friend of mine, Chioma Joy. And then you wrote a piece after
Hmm.
that. Would you
Yeah.
be willing and open to share a little bit about how you found me, how you found the podcast, and then if you're down for it, I would love for you to share the piece.
I came across your podcast from a friend who shared an episode with Allison. And we had been talking about meditation and things like that. And she's like, oh, here's this podcast episode with Allison on it. And I listened to it and I was like, oh, that's really awesome. And I scrolled through. That's what I love about podcasts, especially podcasts that have been around for a while. I can pick and choose and jump around. I don't have to listen to everything in order. I can just kind of go, ooh, that's an interesting topic. And when I came across the healing relationships one, I think I have listened to that episode probably 4 times now. And listening to it, and it made me think of what is love in our relationship to the senses, you know, touch, sound, smell, all the senses, and what would that be like? So I just kind of just created a list, and I'm like, all right, so love, mate, relationship, this is what this looks like. And I'm like, okay. I kind of just set it to the side. And just always, and then, but I think in the back of my mind was pondering, how can I expand on that into a poem? Because this is actually a really interesting concept to share. This year I started the poem account um, to share my writings, because there are some things that I write where I'm just like, I don't necessarily need to share that with everybody. And then there are things where I'm just like, oh, this is, really cool. This is really interesting. And, maybe someone will gain a different perspective after having read it, or, that they didn't have before. Um, and making that connection that way, whether, if they share it or whatever, does it, I mean, so be it. But it's that whole just like It's like, here's love. And then it's like, well, some people say it's like, well, it doesn't really exist. And it's like, okay. And then there are those like, no, no, it exists. And then it's like, but what is that if we thought about it and how we relate that to our senses? Like, what would that be for us? It's definitely not going to be the same.
Right.
So that's how that all came to be.
Okay.
Um, but the poem is called Senses of Love, and it goes as follows.
Okay.
One day I will embark on a journey. This will be a journey with my mate, my life partner, a journey uniquely ours. I imagine it'll taste like tiramisu, moments of sweetness with some hints of bitter, its touch warm and inviting, cozy and comforting, similar to a warm sweatshirt or blanket out of the dryer. It sounds like breathing, breath that's no longer being held, inhaling and exhaling with ease. I imagine it'll smell like hot chocolate, warm and sweet, bringing a smile with every memory. It'll look effortless, the way we flow together. We know the work needed to create this, time and patience, the willingness to be vulnerable with each other. These are only some of the ingredients needed. In essence, it'll be a piece of home. Together or apart, it is with me. I imagine this is what it might be like, a love journey that connects with the senses.
We have to give that the little poetry spin. That's really dope. That's really dope. And it's because the experience of love or being in love is such a full-bodied experience that oftentimes we think of it as just an emotional experience when in truth there is a physical experience that happens. And I think the presentation of it through your writing is it's simple and it's also relatable. It's like the cozy blanket. It's like, ooh, we all know what that feels like to be wrapped up in your favorite cozy blanket. And the taste of maybe your favorite dessert. It's like we know what it feels like when that touches your palate and you're like, ooh, yeah, you can feel it going all the way down.
Yeah.
A lot of times when people write about love, and no shade, but a lot of times when people write about love, the only physical experience of love that we hear about is the sexual experience. We don't hear
Hmm.
about all the other sensible, sense-filled experiences that happen. And when I think about, when I know that my partner comes in the door, whether we've had a great day together or a not so great day together, I know I can feel something in my body when she's in the same room or when she's in the same space. And I can also feel something different when she exits the space. So there's so much of a physical connection that we build with people. And not even just in romantic love, with family. We know that feeling of being like in our mother's home. We know what it smells like, without even
Hmm.
like, yep, that's my mom's house. You know what I mean? Or that's my grandma's house, or whatever. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, that was such a beautiful piece. And as I was reading through more of what you shared before the podcast, what the reason that I like to do a little bit of a questionnaire is because it gives me a chance to really get to know the person I'm going to be talking to, especially because we only spend a short time together. And I
Yeah.
know that you shared so much about your journey back to yourself, from your childhood to early adulthood, and then now finding yourself in this space where you've been able to feel more connected to both your masculine and feminine energy representations, as opposed to like just the polarized relationship with one or the other, and finding the
Hmm.
balance between the two. And I also noticed that you shared a little bit about reconnecting with your sexual side and your sensual side. And I read that and was like, so it's not just me who's experiencing these things, because I had a similar upbringing. I'm the oldest of five kids, and my dad and my mom have been together since they were 15 years old. And my dad, I think really wanted a boy. He got a son after four girls. He finally had a son. I was like the son, like I learned how to, fix things and do what, play with, quote unquote non-girl toys, or,
Hmm.
first to play outside. My first bike was a BMX bike, not a cute girly bike with the little banana seat and the strings. I had a BMX bike was my first bike. And I got like skateboards and roller skates and, basketballs and soccer, like all this quote unquote boy stuff growing up. And
Yeah.
so I've always been, I think, super attuned and in tuned with my masculine energy, even though my aesthetic presentation would be considered more feminine. But that was something that kind of happened over time. I didn't wear makeup in high school. I hated combing my hair and brushing my hair. I never wore like what would be considered like revealing or alluring or like sexy clothing. I didn't even like to wear, I hated wearing dresses. I was always shorts, jeans, t-shirt. And it wasn't until I got to a later stage in my life, like mid 30s, early 40s, that I even explored what my feminine representation and expression looks like for me. Not
Hmm.
necessarily what the societal expectation of what feminine is supposed to be, but what it looked like for me. And
Yeah.
so getting to that place where we can create that balance between the two, it's a really powerful feeling to say, okay, so now I have both. Because sometimes it feels a little lopsided when it's just like one versus the other.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about, how it feels for you to kind of have that balance in your life right now.
It has been interesting. uh, in I will say in the sense of recognizing and being aware that I was much more masculine energy for like a long time in, taking on, in that sense, I think of I have to take care of this. It's my job to take care of this. And then eventually realizing it's like, no, that's not my job. That's that other person's responsibility to take care of their thing. But because for me, it was when I had roommates and stuff like that, I was like, oh, I need to take care of the home and make sure everybody's taken care of, and not realizing it was at the expense of myself, putting me on like the back burner. And then eventually, once that experience, you know, ran its course, and then the reconnecting of myself of going, okay, so I get to do all of these things that I stopped doing. Ooh, okay. Just go enjoy the experience. And then it's the, okay, that's kind of run its course. Now let's find balance in what this looks like. And um you know how does that look like? And I was came across a photo of myself recently from, I'll say, probably in my early 20s, and I looked at it and I go, where did she go? And I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you've seen a picture of yourself and that person's you, but that person that was you at that time, there was a part that's there that, you know, went into hiding, went away, whatever it was. And I'm like, well, where did you go? you know, and how do I, and I don't think it's so much about me getting back to her in that part, because I've evolved and I've, you know, shed so many different layers, grown into new skins. Um, but it's the re like it's the reconnection of self in a different way. So it's the going, it's like, well, I see you, but now you're no longer that individual. You're no longer that person because you're in a different place, in a different state, through all the different lessons and the journeys and things like that. What does that look like now?
Right.
And how do I get to explore that and rediscover, you know, pretty much to me, it's like rediscovering the desirability that I have for myself. if that makes sense. It's, there's the connection and relationship that I have with myself, which is really, really good. But then there's this part of myself that at some point I disconnected from, and then it's like, wait, but you're important and you're valuable. And having it reintroduced with extra information, and I was going, okay, I've got some healing work to do with this because of XYZ. And then it's like, okay, still working through that. It's not as strong, but now it's like, okay, well, now I get to figure out what do I find desirable about myself? You know, what does that look like? Is it the playfulness? Um, is it the quietness? Is it a combination of all of that? Um, so I will say that's kind of where I'm at in that space as I look at the photo and I just kind of go, well, what do I find desirable about myself now? I'm like, now I have to like kind of think about this and see.
Picture of myself that I used to keep in my bedroom and now I have it on my refrigerator. And it was on my 22nd birthday, and I was in the like North Carolina beach area and at Bald Head Island. And a photo was taken of me, and I was standing with my feet maybe like ankle deep in the water. And I had like these cute little jeans, and I had rolled them up because I wasn't planning on touching the water, but I was like, I have to touch this water. And I can just see my whole, just head to toe, full body picture, not a care in the world, you know. And I can see the purity of the smile. And I studied that because I've looked at it every day for so long. And then yesterday I had a photo shoot, and the photographer before we got started said, tell me what you like most about yourself. And I was like, I'm gonna need a minute. You know what I mean? And I was like,
Yeah.
if that, 22-year-old Keyshawn had shown up, I would have probably given you a laundry list of the things that I liked about myself. I have to like sift through all the things that I don't like about myself and then find the thing that I do like. And then the next question she asked was, if you could change anything about yourself, what would it be? And I'm like, girl, I got a list. Where you want me to begin? You want me to start with my shoulders, my elbows, my back, my belly? Like which part? You know what I mean? But it was a moment where I had to really sit with that and say, you know what? The part of me that's in that photo, that's still me. It's not like
Mhm.
it expired or it died away. It's like that's still who I am, which means that same, confidence and that same carefree, adventurous self still exists there. And sometimes I think you have to like go and kind of find it, peel back the layers or get quiet, get still, and really say like, okay, where am I, self? So we can reconnect,
Mhm.
because I think that it's one thing to connect with things outside of ourselves, but when it comes to like going inward, it's like, okay, so what am I going to find here? What healing needs to be done? How much time do I have? Because I don't know how deep I can go right now. I got work to do, you know? But yeah, I switch gears with you just a little bit, and a little quick, Q&A for this last segment of the podcast. One of the questions that I ask beforehand is, if you woke up tomorrow morning with $100 million in your bank, what is the first thing that you would do?
I'm like, after I made sure that it's good and legit, and taxes are all taken, like I would like start dancing and singing, I got $100 million. I got $100 million. And then start the planning. I'm like, okay, how do I not blow through all of this really quickly on stupid stuff just because I have the funds?
Just because I have it, it's like, yeah, I love asking that question, and everybody's answer is a little different. What I find to be really universal is everybody's like, let me make sure it's legit, because we live in a time where we've gotten emails from Nigerian princes. We've gotten all kind of, you may have already won. So we're like, hold on now. We're a little skeptical, with the, like, let me, if that shows up tomorrow, okay, tomorrow's Saturday, let me make sure it's still there Monday. Then I'll officially Get excited. Yes, 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 yes.
Uh,
The next thing we're going to do is complete the sentence. So I'm going to give you some sentence prompts. You complete them, take up as much or as little space as you'd like. The first,
mhm.
I am happiest when.
Mm. Standing in the rain.
Hmm. I know I'm fed up when.
Ooh, think about that one. I know I'm fed up when I've I know I'm fed up when someone just or anyone just keeps repeating the same cycle, and there's there's only so much broken record that can be done until you're like, I can't.
I can't.
I'm not gonna I'm not gonna ride this merry-go-round with you anymore.
I'd like to exit, please. Yeah.
I I I fully accept that that is where you were at. That is okay. You do you, but I don't gotta be on this.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. How about I know I've made an impact when.
When I'm told. Honestly. Um I was I've had this conversation with a couple people, random people, and I am aware that as a massage therapist, there are a lot of us out there, lots of different skills, things like that. Um, and I know for myself, I may not be the right person for you, but in the time that I have you in the session that I'm with you, my goal is to make you not feel worse than when you walked into the room with me. And if I did that, I'm good. And if you decide to come back and see me again, to me that's just extra bonus. That just means we connected in a way that you like the thing that I did. So honestly, it's really just like, if you tell me, that's how I really know.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you. It's sometimes hearing it just affirms what your hope or your intention was. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
cool. I'm still doing good. Okay, good. Last,
Yeah.
spirituality is.
Can you repeat that? You cut out a little bit.
Yes, absolutely. The last one was spirituality is.
Spirituality is a taste like no other. I will say that. It's not one thing. It is a lot of many things, and that, I will say, I think it, going back to the senses, like, it feels and it tastes and it smells, and it's just all these different things, for us as individuals. It's a very important journey, but it's also very individualistic, even though we do come together as a collective and as a community in different ways. But it's very personal, you know and it that journey goes in so many different ways, and it just, you know I was like, I don't know, taste was the thing that just like came to mind. I was like, it just tastes really differently, and just the different tastes, like, they hit your taste bud and it feels a different way, and it brings in something different each time, and it's just like, even if it's something bitter, you're just like, ugh. But I was like, okay, I needed to go through that, needed to work through that. That was a little tough. Okay. Oh, okay. That's much better. That's more palatable.
I love that. So, last thing before we go, we're going to get into a time machine for a second. So, take a breath and get into your time machine. And we're going to travel all the way back to your 16-year-old self. When you step
Ooh.
outside the time machine, you see this 16-year-old you standing in front of you, what is the first thing that you say?
Let go and breathe.
Yeah. Yeah. Now we're going to get back into your time machine and we're going to go all the way forward. We don't know how far forward, but we're going to go all the way to the end. What do you want to be remembered for?
Ooh. My willingness to experience things.
Mm. Yeah, that's good stuff. So we get back in our time machine and we come back to the present moment. And the last thing I like to offer to every one of my guests is a quick pull from one of my favorite Oracle decks. There's exactly 52 cards in this deck. So all I need from you is to pick a number between 1 and 52.
11.
11. Yay. So this is a really fun deck. It's super lighthearted. The message for number 11 is bring it. Bring it. Comes with this says, wow, you are brave and fearless these days, even if it doesn't feel that way. You are being called to take off your armor and leap. Today is the day to call fear out as the wimpy imposter that it is. It's time to go for it.
I like it. I was thinking about the your experience with the photo shoot and how one of the questions was that you had been asked was like, what would you want to let go of? And I was thinking about it, um, the remainders of the scarcity mindset.
Yes.
It's like I've worked through a lot of things. So it's like, but there's still those lingering parts of that. And I was like, that still takes time to get through them. But I was like, that would be the thing that I would let go of. So that going to like let go of fear. And I'm like,
Just for
there
you.
it is.
Just for you. Well, this has been such a pleasure. I mean, I absolutely love when I get to connect with people that I haven't had the privilege of knowing or meeting in real life, so to speak. And when I saw your post a couple weeks ago, it always touches me when someone that I don't know, like I love my friends, I love my family, I love my people, but it's great when someone outside of that really is impacted by the podcast because this is such a passion project for me. This is something
Mm-hmm.
I started, in the front seat of my car in 2018, and I've just continued. And I love being able to connect with new people and just hear like a little slice of their story. And sharing your poem with us today was fantastic. So I just want to say thank you so much. Just keep doing what you're doing. You have a beautiful voice, you have a beautiful story. And I think the more that we share our stories with each other, that at least we can use social media for something good.
It's not all bad. It's just
All
you
that.
got to find that balance. You got to find that balance. But thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll be in touch soon.
You too. Have a good day.
You know, peace.